He was probably 185-inch 9-point.
190 at least. Oh my! He was right there, right underneath me. The biggest deer I've ever seen in my entire life.
He swore it was world record. I don't know if I'll take it that far.
I had a giant mule deer. We thought maybe top 5 archery for the state.
The biggest 7 I've ever seen in my life.
I squeezed that trigger and all I hear was.
All right, guys, today we're going to be talking about something probably every hunter has gone through. And if you haven't, then you probably haven't been hunting long enough, or you're just a stone cold killer, unlike myself. But if you are anything like me, I'm sure you've had a hunt where things just really didn't go in your favor. Whether that be a missed shot opportunity, or maybe just an encounter that didn't work out, but should have, and it still haunts you to this day. And this is what we call close but no cigar. Well, the good news is we are not alone in this. And to help us feel a little bit better about ourselves, here are a few of those stories from some absolute whitetail killers. So without further ado, here are their close but no cigars.
We do this mini series kind of towards the end of the podcast, and it's called Close But No Cigar. And basically what it is what's that one encounter you guys have had that, whether that be an encounter or shot opportunity, that still haunts you to this day?
Hopefully on a big old buck.
Yeah.
Honestly, I've got everything I've shot at.
We get it.
I'm very particular and very patient, though. You know, I pass more deer than most, or than a lot. I won't say the most, but I pass a lot of deer.
And again, that's what a lot of people say, but I was kind of skeptical at first too, and then you started whipping out your phone, showing us those videos, and I was like, okay, you got me.
Funny story. I was at the Bow Hunting League Showdown last year, and it's about killing deer, I guess. I mean, I'm just picky. I was looking for a buck. I wanted to kill a buck in Arkansas. I had 4 shot opportunities, and I hunted one afternoon. And I was riding back with one of the guys, and I was showing him video, because I always take videos of what I pass, and he kind of chewed me out for not shooting one.
Yeah.
I was like, what, you know? I enjoyed the tree time.
Yeah. It's Arkansas too. I mean, most people don't even kill a buck in Arkansas. It's pretty tough hunting.
Well, that's why I was holding out for a buck. But, I mean, these were all does that walked by. But I'm going back next weekend, matter of fact, to the showdown, and I'll probably shoot something.
There you go. What about you?
Actually, I would say probably last year. You know, like you always want to like hunt a giant, and everyone's like, title of a giant's different. But last year I finally got on a giant, 190 at least.
Oh my God!
I'll show you guys after
What
this.
does that thing look like? Just describe it for the people.
He's just like 13-inch 2s, 13-inch 3s, just tall, real symmetrical, big 9-point, huge, just gigantic. Like I said, I can show you a picture. I mean, I have a really good friend, and he was letting me hunt his family's property last year, and he was living in Nebraska, and so he couldn't get down a bunch. And so I went and got in a stand one night on the north end of the property, and I saw some pretty good movement all along this, just like this sidle ridge. And so I sat up there next week, and I shot a pretty good one, shot like a 130-inch 8-point. And so that night we were in there, and we shot him, tracked him, found him, you know, pulled the four-wheeler in there, made all kinds of noise, whatever. That night I get home, get in my bed, I'm sitting there, I get a picture, boom, there he is, giant. I mean, 100%, 190-inch deer. So I have never hunted anything like that personally. I've never had anything like that on camera. That's a whole nother gear you have in you when you get something like that on camera. I didn't know I could be that devoted to hunting a deer. And so I think it was that towards the end of November, we had a really, really cold stretch. I mean, rainy, 15 degrees, blowing. It was nasty, disgusting weather. And I was in there, and I was freezing my butt off. And sure enough, I hear a grunt. And here comes a doe, and she comes right underneath me. And I'm hunting like a little locust tree, and they drop like these pods. And these deer will stop beneath these pods every once in a while. And she comes in, and she's like milling and messing around, and she's looking behind her, and here he comes. And it's just boom. And it's just like, it's...
Start dribbling down your leg
a
a little
gosh,
bit.
it's the most... I've never had, like, I had buck fever before, you know, but that is a whole different kind of ball game. And he gets into 5 yards, and I'm full drawn, and I can't. It's a matter of me taking an unethical shot and shooting through a limb and risking it, or just letting him take a few steps and clearing, and then shooting him right there. And instead of taking 2 steps, he looks up, that doe, she takes off running, and he's gone, and I never saw him again. But he was right there, right underneath me, the biggest deer I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean, it's something we dream about. I mean, as a kid that just watches deer hunting shows as a little boy all the time, that was the deer. And he was right there.
And your buddy from Nebraska knew that deer existed?
No.
Of course he did.
We did not know. We did not know. And come to find out, actually, the year prior, we were shed hunting that property, and we had found his shed, and we had him on camera the year prior, but we didn't. The connection wasn't there. He had made such a huge jump that you just couldn't even put it two together. And then come to find out it was him.
So you took a medical leave of absence at work and hunted
yeah.
that deer the rest of the year?
He probably remembers, but there was a week or so where I was.
Yeah, he went a lot.
Yeah, I went a lot to hunt that deer for sure. So that was my close one.
But I hunted a lot too, so.
Yeah.
I didn't know he was gone.
Like, you at the shop? You? No, you.
Yeah.
There's been several bucks that I can reflect back on that I did not kill that, man, I wish I could go back. There was one in particular. He was an absolute giant typical. He was probably 200 inches, 100% clean typical, just a huge frame deer that I ended up getting a shot at him right at dark one afternoon. And I cut some hair on him, but no blood whatsoever. That buck, he was a tough character, but I wish I could go back and hunt that deer again. If I would have known then what I know now, I would have killed that deer, guaranteed. Because back then there just wasn't as much hunting pressure, and I had access at that point to multiple properties in that deer's range, and with no competition from other bow hunters. Now, there was some gun hunting pressure back then, but the bow pressure was nothing like it became later. That's a buck I'd love to go back and hunt. There's another buck that I had him dead to rights, and I was trying to give up the wind. I was trying to cover two trails, one on each side of my stand, and I had to give up the wind. So in other words, no matter which way the wind was blowing, it was either blowing to this trail or to that trail. And he came by, and I knew that buck was in there because I'd seen it rained all the night before, and the rain quit right about daylight. And as I was going into that stand that afternoon, I seen his tracks in the mud, just a single set of giant tracks. One deer by himself. I knew it was a mature buck, and he was going right into the woodlot where I was going to hunt. I knew I was going to have a good chance of seeing that deer that afternoon. And sure enough, he comes by, but he's on the downwind trail. And just as I see him, he hits my scent and blows out of there. That was probably about a 160-inch 10-pointer, but I recall that buck really well. Those two bucks, didn't get either one of them, but boy, they sure helped me kill a lot of other bucks after that. Well, there's no doubt that the biggest missed opportunity in my life is the buck that I described a little bit ago, the giant typical that I shaved hair but didn't draw blood. I called him the Cedar House buck because the first time that I seen him, I was hunting behind this house that had cedar siding on it. And so I just called him the Cedar House buck. And I really think that buck was a 200-inch typical.
That's
just
incredible.
Absolutely ginormous frame, wide and tall. I had a friend from Ohio. He was quite a bit older than me at the time. I was probably in my late 20s when that happened. And had a friend from Ohio that was probably around 40 or so at the time. He came and he would hunt with me for a week in Illinois, and then I'd go back and hunt with him for a week in Ohio each year during the rut. And that fall, he seen the buck when he was here. And that is all that guy talked. He even came back and hunted the late season when it was really difficult because I didn't own a property. I didn't have food plots or anything. And after our gun season back in those days, it was very, very difficult to lay eyes on a buck. We didn't have as many deer back then, for one thing, but he was so fired up after seeing that deer, he swore that it was a 200-inch world record. He swore it was world record. Now, I don't know if I'd take it that far, but I'm telling you, that was a giant that still haunts me to this day. Almost, 30, more than 30 years later. It still haunts me to this day.
Yes, sir. I know exactly which one I'm going to because we talked about dreaming about deer. Well, the nightmare that I have in the middle of the night, this buck, he was probably 185-inch 9-point. And 9.
Dear God. That's huge.
Tomorrow, and I'll send you a picture. I'll send you a video clip. We got video footage of him. I had no idea this deer was there. It was Illinois, and we were hunting on a river, and he was, coming down that river with some does. I have no idea where he came from, but I saw him the first afternoon. He came up with a doe and was about 60 yards away with the doe. And of course, I wheezed and grunted at him, and he kept on going with the doe. And I mean, Kevin, the guy that was filming, we were just blunt. I mean, obviously, you're like, oh my gosh, what was he, a 9? Was he a 12? I mean, all you could see was the cage. And they ran down into the river bottom and they were gone. Well, of course, we went right back there the next day. And about 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning, there's a doe coming up behind us from the river bottom. And she's coming up. And so yearling doe, and he's right behind her. And she's feeding up our way. And I'm like, oh my God, we're going to get a shot at him. And here he comes. He's lumbering up right behind her. She does a loop out, can't smell us. The wind's perfect. She loops and comes right through a shooting lane at 20 yards and walks back down to the bottom. And he's browsing on something but watching her. And then all of a sudden he takes the trail, and here he comes. And I'm like, you are dead. I'm about to play world record 9-point.
That's that celebrating we were talking about earlier.
What guys listening won't be able to see this, so I'll try and describe it. But it was behind us, and back then this was probably 14 or 15. Those camera bases you had were giant. I don't know if y'all remember those, but they had giant ratchet straps.
Oh yeah.
Big metal blocky things. And I turned around to draw my bow, and the camera base was in the way, and I could not draw my bow. I tried to get on a knee, and then the limbs would hit it. I did everything, and he walked right through the shooting lane at 20, 25 yards, turned his butt to me, and walked straight to her. And, when I got out of range, of course, I grunted at him and all that. And he was probably 6.5. He was a big, mature buck, obviously. And he just kind of looked back, and I never will forget those big, black, dark shark eyes looking back going, I know you're a hunter, and there's no chance I'm coming back. And he took the duck. Yeah. That was it. That was the end of that one.
It's painful.
Oh boy. Yeah, it hurts right now. It hurts.
I just can't imagine the frame on that sucker. What'd you say, 187-inch 9 or something like that?
Mid 180, 9-point. Yeah.
Oh my God.
That's probably 2 or 3 inches.
Oh man.
He's humongous.
That is awesome. Yeah, that is the deer of nightmares. You were right.
Yeah, that one. To this day, I don't use a whole lot of profanity, but every time I see Kevin and think of that, I have to light into him a little bit.
Yeah. He deserves it.
The wrong way. Yeah, he put his face in the wrong place.
Has to be a big one. Okay, I have a great one actually. Can it be a mule deer story? Because
sure.
This is tragic. That's a great one, though. Not a lot of people know about this story. This is a well kept secret. But I hunted Nebraska. West Nebraska had a giant mule deer. We thought maybe top 5 archery for the state. I go to hunt him, find him. He's not on the piece I can hunt. He's on a private piece. I go knock on the door. They're like, yeah, go ahead. We don't want mule deer anyway. And I'm like, okay, cool. Go hunt this deer. I literally pull up side by side, get off, standing there with my cameraman. The deer, we had him in this ditch, like, I don't know, probably 500 yards from us. And my camera guy is like, oh my God, what's this? And looks up, and the deer is running at us for no reason, just running at us. He comes up, and I'm like scrambling. All right, like I got my bow. I'm like trying to get an arrow in it, all that stuff. I'm on the ground, like put it together. I'm like, I look up and I range him, or he's going to come out of this little crevice at like 30 yards. So I draw my bow and I raise up and I shoot him and I miss him. I shoot over his back. Camera guy had it. Like he was just free, like literally holding the camera. Didn't even have it on a tripod or anything. I'm like, what is going on? So this deer runs off. Well, I guess he had day bedded. A lot of times in Nebraska, they'll day bed and then they'll get up in the middle of the day when it gets hot and the sun gets on them and they'll move. Well, he was a big deer and he was going to the cornfield, the standing cornfield that we were parked on the edge of. So he had bedded in that crevice and was going there. So I'm like, gosh. So he goes in there. Next day I go in, find him on the private piece, stalk all the way up to him, 57 yards, draw the bow, shoot him, hit him back in like about like no man's land, but high and back. So give him 6 hours, track him for 2.5 miles.
Oh,
straight across. Don't find him. I'm like, great. Leave. A month later, he shows up on trail camera again. Fine. I'm like, all right, we're going to go back. So we go back. I get my bow, shoot my bow, and I had a nick in my string, and it blew up on me while we're at the lodge. The bow just turns into a chandelier. So I'm like, crap. So I have this crossbow. I always carry a crossbow. I keep a crossbow with me.
Keep that thing on me.
Just to keep that. I stay strapped with a crossbow. So I have it. I'm like, well, I guess I'll do this crossbow thing. So we've got a crossbow. So we find the deer, go in on him. 54 yards. I have him with the crossbow. I shoot. I just didn't play the wind. The wind goes back. I hit him almost identical spot. So the deer goes up over the hill and lays down, beds up. I'm like, cool, we got this. So we swing around, get on him. Well, in my haste of doing it, I cocked the crossbow. My limb delaminates, so it splinters. Splinters doesn't break, but splinters and is cocked. So we put a crossbow bolt in it. I'm like, well, I'm going to shoot it. That's all I got at this point, right? This deer's laying down. So we sneak up on him. Takes like 4 hours because he's facing downwind, and you can't get like the upwind side is where the cover is, and he's facing directly downwind. He's in a great spot for him. So I can't do anything. So I have to kind of work him on like a crosswind around this little point. And I get up there and he's like 20 yards. I pull up, I shoot. The arrow, is probably, I don't know, that far low, right? Probably from the delaminated limb. But anyway, so he gets up and he runs up on the hill. So I'm like, all right, so we're just going to give him overnight. So we gave him overnight and then went back in there, and there's no deer, no blood. We follow blood for maybe 150 yards. Don't find it. Don't find the deer, nothing. So there's standing corn on this farm. So we're like, hey, when you guys harvest the corn, watch out for this deer because he's laying in here or whatever. Never find the deer, never, like, nothing. No pictures, nothing. We're come to find out the neighbor found the deer dead a mile away, and it was would have been number 3. Archery typical mule deer.
You're kidding.
Swear to God. Shot him twice. Never found him.
Did you get him back?
What did he end up scoring?
It's like 190 something. I think 190.
God.
It was huge.
Well, at that point,
I offered him, so I was going to have him. I was like, dude, I'll make you a replica, and I'll give you $500. And he was like, no, I don't like non-residents.
Oh my gosh, what a tool.
Yeah. So, yeah, that happened.
That's when you practiced your vocabulary.
That's when I focused my vocabulary. Yeah, that's the worst, probably worst hunting story of my life.
No.
I probably would have went John Wick on him at that point.
Dude,
I'm going to get there.
I was so crushed.
The one that stands out the most, I was probably around 19 or 20 years old, hunting in Georgia. I'd never hunted anywhere else my whole life, and I have one of my best friends, Fred Branch. He's got a great place to hunt in Georgia, not far from where I grew up. He invited me to go hunting, and so we go hunt that morning. It was December. It was November. It was right around Thanksgiving, and we saw a bunch of deer. I actually grunted in a buck that morning, which was pretty cool. Like, that doesn't happen a ton in Georgia, or didn't back then when I was growing up hunting. Just, learning what I'm doing still. So we're rifle hunting, and I'm a big fan of bolt action rifles. Like that's what I like to shoot. Everybody's got their preference. But what I always did is when I got through hunting, this is not the safest thing in the world, so I'm going to preface this when I was young and dumb. Just let it ride. Instead of unloading the rifle, taking the bullet out when I would get it back to the truck or whatever, I would just open the bolt and disengage the bolt where it could slide open some so the gun wouldn't fire. Well, that afternoon we go hunting, and I sit in the truck, and I'm sitting in the passenger side and look down when my bolt's up, so I just close the bolt, put it over my shoulder, and I go get in the stand. I climb up this ladder stand. Again, climbing in a ladder stand, assuming that I have a loaded weapon, is not the best idea ever. Safety first. especially if I got older. But I get in the stand, sit down, everything's good. Been there about 30, 40 minutes. And I look over to my right, and I'm sitting on a food plot that's in front of me, and the road comes right in front of my stand, and it bends and goes away from me, so I can see down the road this way, and I can see a food plot straight in front of me. This is a pretty good little spot. There's some pines, thick pines here, some more open pines over here. Well, I look down, just glance around, look down this road, and I see literally what I think is a horse walking through the woods. I said, holy crap, somebody's cow got it. I mean, like, this is just caught me off guard because we're talking about body size of deer. And sure enough, it's a buck. And this thing is huge, like biggest body deer I've ever seen at the time, biggest rack I've ever seen. And he walks across this road. Man, that was a giant. And the only thing I can think, well, get your gun up, put it on the shooting rail of the ladder stand, get your grunt call, put it in your mouth, get ready, grunt to this deer, and see if you can make him walk out on this food plot. Just like on TV, right?
It's that easy.
So, dude, my plan works to perfection. I hit my grunt call 3 times. This giant buck comes running out. His rack looks like a fishbowl. He just comes up. His tines are super long, comes out, and he runs right in the middle of this food plot. He's like 75, 80 yards away, kind of quartering to me. He stops. He poses up, bows his chest out, and he's just looking in my direction. And I've got and he stopped in my rifle scope with my crosshairs right there. So I'm like, game over. I squeezed that trigger, and all I hear was click. Remember when I told you about the bolt being up in my gun?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't loaded. So I unloaded the gun, and then thinking when my bolt was up that it was already loaded when I got out of the truck. So I didn't have a bullet in the chamber. So I squeeze and I click, and I can see this deer's eyes just go this big when he hears that click. It's almost like he knew what it was. He's like, oh, crap, I should be dead. So I'm doing everything I can to ease this bolt back, slide it back, put another bullet in there, ease it forward, close it down, get it up, put it on that rail. And about the time I find him in my scope, I see his rear end going in the woods. And out of my life forever. So I learned to always check my gun for when it's loaded and unloaded. Be ready.
Gun.
And I mean, I almost wanted to cry. Like this deer, in my mind anyway, whatever it's worth. I mean, this at the time was by far the biggest deer I've ever seen, and ever, in Georgia I would say he was 150, 160 inch deer.
That's a big one. That's a big one anywhere.
Yeah. So there you go. That haunts me today. Until I killed that other 160 I was telling you about a while ago. Then we kind of evened that out a little bit.
Yeah, so if you remember, I talked about I had a big 8-point that I hunted in between opening day and then when I killed mine. We had this little 75-acre tract. It's the same triangle farm that Jeff killed his deer off this year over the decoy. This farm, it's kind of crazy. It's 75 acres, and I don't think one single deer lives on it. They all live across the road on the neighbors, and that, to our knowledge, he doesn't hunt, and he's got some really good stuff. And but we got food on ours. We got crops and wheat and beans and that kind of stuff. So they would come across the road and hunt on or eat on us. And there's this really big 8-point, just a big frame, probably 150 to 155. For an 8-point, just a hammer.
It's a beast.
And I hunted him quite a bit. I probably hunted him 10 days, not in a row, but sporadically. And I saw him, I believe, 4 or 5 times, and twice he came by at 55 yards, 55 to 65 yards, where, I could have shot at him, but I didn't. And on the one that really hurts, same deer, me and Ty, who's one of our field producers, we went in, I believe it was probably mid-November, somewhere in there. And we had a water tank that these deer were coming to and a ground blind. We got in the ground blind. It's a nice evening. And all of a sudden, this little buck, kind of a half rack, pops up. He's coming to this water tank. And then I look behind him, and there's another buck and another buck. Well, then there's the big 8. So there's basically 4 bucks coming right at us. They're about, 70 yards. And they're going to come to this water tank, which is, probably 40 yards. And I was going to get an opportunity. And we're sitting there, and I'm watching when all of a sudden this owl flies out of the trees and lands on the water tank. And that first half-rack buck, he didn't like that. And it kind of freaked him out. So he, locked up and just stared at that thing for probably, 10 or 15 minutes. And ultimately it just held all those bucks up until after legal light. And so they end up coming in. Finally, the owl leaves after dark or whatever, and they end up coming to the water tank, but it's 5 minutes after legal light. And, they were going to be there well before legal light ended. And I was, Lord willing, I was going to at least release an arrow.
At the owl or?
Well, I wanted to. What's funny is our Ty, who was filming me, he's like, man, I've never seen, I've always wanted to take a cool picture of an owl. And he was taking these pictures of the owl and all this stuff. And then the owl ended up ruining our hunt about 30 minutes later. And again, I thought that's kind of how my season was going. Like we'd be close, but couldn't quite get it done. And this time, it was like he was going to walk into my lap. And Lord said, no, not today. Maybe, which it worked out for me.
Yeah.
So I got to shoot a bigger deer and this and that. But if you're not going to shoot a big buck every year. I mean, honestly, most people, it's not an easy thing to do, especially if you only get to hunt weekends or whatever it may be. But just enjoy it. Enjoy the process, the time you're out there, and again, hunt smart, and your odds will be as good as they can be, I guess.
The best one is I had a big 7, probably the heaviest, biggest 7. I would say he was a 150-inch deer.
Oh my God! As a 7?
As a 7, I would say he is the. And I drew back. I was probably 15 or 16, so it was my second or third year bow hunting, and I grazed him right underneath. Cut hair, didn't get no blood, nothing, and that's still one. And he just took off running. He was the biggest 7 I've ever seen in my life, and that's when I wish I could go back and have that deer on my wall, man. And it was that same exact ridge where I killed my 135, same tree, just that same ridge, man. There's always.
You gonna drop us a pin later on that, or what?
I'm sure it's out there on the internet.
I actually.
I know that one right off the top of my head. 1975.
What happened there?
1975. I was hunting hunting between 2 hills. The hills had been clear cut, so there was all probably 7-year-old saplings, and it was dense. Deer were bedding in it, and there was a draw between these 2 hills, and the draw was just kind of weeds. And I was hunting in an oak right kind of at the end of the draw where it goes out into a big open CRP field. And I'd had 10 or 11 does and fawns, and I think 1 4-point come out of the saplings down into the draw and kind of transition right underneath the tree I was in within like 10 yards. And about an hour before dark, and it was a bright sunny day. It was just a beautiful day. About 140 incher, which for Michigan back then, it was rare to see a 2.5 back then, because we had $1 million. It killed everything. Nobody passed on a 3-inch spike horn back then. So 2.5s were rare. And this 140 incher was probably a 4 or 5.5-year-old, because it was in northern Michigan where there's sandy soil.
Been shot like 6 times.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times he's been shot, because I never killed him to find out. But he came out of the saplings way up at the end, and he's coming down through the draw, and he's on the same route all those does had went. So I'm, and this is kind of getting into late October, pre-rut. And he's kind of checking those does, and he stops at about 35 yards. And I had a 35-yard pin on my bow. I had a bear pole or 2 at the time. And I shot leagues, and I was really good at 35 yards. And he's standing there broadside in the sun. And I drew my bow. I put my 35-yard pin on him. And I said, you know what? He's on this runway. Why take this 35-yard shot? He's going to come right down here following these does and give me a 12-yard chip shot. So I let up, and he stood there for about another 10 seconds. And all of a sudden, he just bolted up the side of this hill, up on this one hill, up into the edge of the saplings. And I noticed when he started going up the hill, I saw doe. I looked up there, and I saw doe just inside the saplings kind of take off. I did not know it was there. But when he stopped at 35 yards, he must have heard something up there. And then, anyway, the short story is I missed an opportunity that I know I could have capitalized on because I wanted a better shot. So I learned at that point in time, if I'm pretty positive I can make the shot, take it and don't assume you're going to get a closer shot later, later on that set.
Yeah,
that gave me nightmares because it was the biggest one at that time that I'd ever had an opportunity.
Oh, yeah. Dadgum. Well, that's awesome. It's not awesome, but it's a good story.
No, it is awesome because, you never forget those mistakes. When you make mistakes like that, you never forget them. There's no way of learning, no better way of learning than making a mistake and, having to remember it.
I guess my closest encounter, like a really big deer, it was one that I just decided that I don't need to kill this deer because I was at a friend's club, the invite and the, hey, shoot whatever, saying, which I hate more than anything. And I made the, specification, hey, so like, even if like some giant walks out, like probably not gonna happen, but if a giant walked out, it's when y'all have been hunting and they were like, use your discretion. And I was like, what does that mean? They're saying, just do whatever. And it's like, so at that point you're like, okay, so really they're thinking like, you better not shoot the deer, you better let him walk because you're a guest here. So I had a probably 140-inch deer, 15 yards away for probably 15, 20 minutes. In shooting range, broadside, looking around, walking, galloping, frolicking right in front of me for 15 or 20 minutes. And it took all of me not to shoot the deer, but I did not get the opportunity to shoot. And that just kind of, from then on, I've always said when people invite me, man, I appreciate the invite, but I'm okay. And like, unless they're like the guy from Ohio that's like, seriously, come kill any deer you want. It's like, I'm down for that. Like when someone's like that open to like, please, man, I don't hunt there. It's open to you. I'm in. But so that's why I don't do that anymore. So still
I don't blame you. Yeah, that would have been so tough. But I mean, I guess you did salvage the relationship out of the deal still.
Yeah, we're also really close. So, but they don't invite me, and I don't go.
For me, so I guess last year the deer Groot. So it's on the YouTube channel. It's the story of Groot or whatever. Big non-typical deer I was on last year. I had it set up perfectly, like I told y'all. Built the whole season up to that one encounter. But the mistake that I made that I still can't sleep good at night is because the corn had basically been evaporated, and he daylighted twice in a row, but I knew that there was like no feed left. So I went in at like 10 a.m. the morning before I hunted, and I just sprinkled some fresh bait just to kind of spice it up a little bit. And then I hunted that afternoon, and he came in and stopped about 10 yards short of the bait where I could get a shot and stood there for 30 minutes. Because he just knew the ground scent. He just stood there and just stared around and just looked around forever. And then finally just started to walk off. And I took a shot at like 30 yards, but it was like at last light, and this big black vine was hanging down. And I didn't realize I cut the vine until Cheeto and I got down later and found the arrow, looked at the path, and saw what happened. But if I would have just hunted, he would have come right in there, and just it would have been teed up perfectly, and it would have been drawn up exactly to plan. But that one mistake of just putting my feet in that spot, it cost me that deer. So lesson learned.
I shot that bull elk with mechanical, watch it go in, hit the rib cage, run down the skin, pop out the bottom. And it was probably they're always bigger in your mind than what they are, but it was a
400.
He's a 380 or better. Okay. It just broke my heart. It broke my heart. So I don't know. There's been plenty that I pulled back on too and thought in my younger days I'd have just flung the arrow at him. But now I'm like, I'm not sure I'm going to make that shot, so I'll let down and let him pass. It's more about some days it's about sleeping in the tree stand, I'll be honest. But some days it's about just knowing that you took that shot that was either so close you could smell them. I want to shoot those ones that are 8 yards out, not the ones that are 80 yards out. I want to be up close and personal when I whack that thing. It's more intimate that way as far as the memories. And I try to get my son and my wife and everybody to think that way. Is when you're doing it with a bow, it's because you want to get in close and personal. So is 40 yards close and personal, or is 4 yards close and personal? You know, and this, how do you eliminate your smell? And, you know, I'm that guy. I just want to get in and have them walk underneath you and not even know that they just got smoked.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I had 2 just last year. You know, I can still see the sight picture, and it's like, you got a good rest. You know, it's all good. Why wait for that next opening? And yeah, just slipping through the opening on me. I don't know. It's what's called hesitating at the moment of truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything lined up, and I second guessed myself. And I had 2 of those last year. And
big bucks or what?
Yeah, big bucks from where I've come from. Yeah. So here's what I say to myself. You know what, Gino? You're pretty decent at putting yourself in front of deer. You're really good at putting other people in front of deer and letting them shoot them, right? That's always the way it goes. Just trust yourself. And, you know, you work hard all year to get yourself in that position, capitalize on those opportunities, and don't second guess yourself. And that's what drives us. I mean, like, I can't wait for the next opportunity, maybe on those bucks again, if they're alive. So, yeah.
So as you guys can see, blowing an encounter or missing a deer happens all the time, no matter how good you are. So does knowing this make it hurt any less? Absolutely not. But as hunters, I feel like there are a lot of things that we try to control, but the reality of the situation is there are far more things that are just out of our hands. Now, you can do all the right things like practice shooting all summer, playing the wind, making sure the deer's broadside, pulling through your shot, but if things aren't meant to be, it just simply will not happen. And that is something I kind of find comfort in when these tough situations like this occur. You see, Proverbs 16:33 says that we may throw the dice, but the Lord determines how they fall. And what this is basically saying is that even those things that we think of as pure chance are still under God's control. And even though it might not seem like it in the moment, God is making things happen that way for your own good. So with that, guys, even though we love hunting and the pursuit of that animal, just know that in the grand scheme of things, a big buck on the wall really doesn't mean much. So with that, if you guys like this kind of content, be sure to give this video a like and make sure you hit that sub button, but most importantly, always know that Jesus loves you.